So, Nintendo has finally announced its highly anticipated sequel to the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch 2. And while I do implore you to check out our very own Scott Stein's hands-on with a hybrid console, I thought I'd run you through a specs comparison with the OG Switch for all the owners thinking about upgrading. Now, this is strictly an on-paper comparison, so do make sure you come back to CNET when we give you more coverage of the Switch 2. Okay, starting with price and storage. The Switch 2 has an internal storage of 256 gigs, while the OG Switch has 8 times less at 32 gigabytes. Both have expandable storage, with the Switch using microSD and the Switch 2 using microSD Express, a card that does provide faster loading, but unfortunately is not compatible with the OG Switch, so you can't bring over your old memory sticks and put them into the new Switch 2, unfortunately. And for price, the Switch was originally $300 at launch. The Switch 2 will be $450. Design-wise, there are a few differences between the two consoles. In terms of physical dimensions, the OG Switch measures approximately 9.4 inches wide and 4 inches tall, with the Joy-Cons attached. The Switch 2 is an inch wider and maybe half an inch taller, making it approximately 10.4 inches wide and 4.5 inches tall. Despite the increase, the Switch 2 maintains the same thickness as the original Switch at 13.99mm. There's also an extra USB-C port on the top of the device that could be used to charge while in tabletop mode or for connecting accessories like the Switch 2 camera. The kickstand has also been redesigned from the flimsy little thing on the OG Switch to the much bigger kickstand on the Switch 2 that is freely adjustable. The Joy-Cons do seem to have undergone a substantial evolution. They are bigger, weighing in at 2.3 and 2.4 ounces compared to the original Switch's 1.7 and 1.8 ounce Joy-Cons. A common complaint with the original Switch from users was that the Joy-Cons were just a little too small and too cramped sometimes. And while the Switch 2 Joy-Cons aren't exactly full size, they should offer a bit more comfort with prolonged use. There's been a significant change to colors too. No longer the colorful red and blue of the original, the Switch 2 has instead opted for a sleek dark grey with color accents around the analog stick and docking mechanism. But here's hoping more colorful Joy-Cons will come on the horizon. Another difference between both Joy-Cons is the docking method. The OG Switch has rails which you would slide into the main display when it was in handheld mode, while the Switch 2 has opted for a magnetic docking system, which should make docking a whole lot easier. The Switch 2 also offers mouse control, enabling you to use both Joy-Cons as you would a mouse for selected games. The original Switch doesn't have this feature. The C button on the Joy-Cons also enables a new feature on the Switch 2 called Game Chat, but more on that later. Moving on to display, and some of you might be disappointed. The OG Switch has a 6.2-inch LCD touchscreen display with a 720p output and a refresh rate of 60Hz. The Switch 2 has a 7.9-inch LCD touchscreen with a 1080p output, HDR10 support, and 120Hz refresh rate, meaning the Switch 2 will not be OLED, which is a tad disappointing, but probably also hints to a Switch 2 OLED down the line. Nintendo also made a few tweaks to the dock. The Switch 2's dock outputs at 4K while the OG Switch outputs at 1080p. The Switch 2's dock is slightly bigger at 4.5 inches tall and 7.9 inches wide compared to the OG Switch's dock, which is 4.1 inches tall and 6.8 inches wide. The only other difference between the two docks is the Switch 2 has a cooling fan and a LAN port built in, meaning you won't need to buy a separate dock for the feature. Now, when you're undocked, you will be relying on that internal battery. The Switch 2 has a 5220 mAh battery that gives 2 to 6.5 hours of playtime, while the OG Switch has a 4310 mAh battery, which weirdly gives a more substantial 4.5 to 9 hours of playtime. And both sets of Joy-Cons have a 20-hour runtime and require 3.5 hours for a full charge. Finally, I'll finish up with features you won't have on the OG Switch, like Game Share. A new Switch 2 feature where players can share and play the same games with others who do not have the game. If one person has a Switch 2 and a game compatible with Game Share, that person can invite others to temporarily play the game and play together via local play with their Switch 2 or OG Switch. Game Share can also be used in conjunction with Game Chat for online play between Switch 2s. Game Chat allows you to talk to online friends whilst gaming, a feature which was sorely missing from the OG Switch. There's so much more to delve into with the Switch 2, and we do plan on doing more coverage, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And for any of you who has the original Switch, do those specs sound like something that could tempt you into upgrading? Do let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and catch you on the next one.